When you stop texting and calling a man, the first thing that happens is simple. He notices. Whether he acknowledges it right away or not, there's an undeniable shift in his reality. Human beings, by nature, are creatures of habit. We fall into patterns, and when something that was once predictable suddenly changes, the mind instinctively seeks to understand why. This is where the real psychological game begins. At first, he may brush it off. Maybe you're just busy. Maybe your phone died. Maybe you're trying to get his attention. But notice none of these explanations place responsibility on him. His initial response is often to rationalize your absence in a way that maintains his sense of control. This is an unconscious defense mechanism, one designed to protect his ego from the possibility that he may not be as significant to you as he once believed. But the mind can only ignore discomfort for so long. The absence of your presence creates a void. And here's where the paradox of human desire comes into play. Scarcity amplifies value. It's the same reason luxury brands limit production. When something is readily available, it's easy to take for granted. When it's removed, suddenly its worth is reconsidered. The same applies to emotional connections. The deeper psychological shift happens when he starts questioning not just why you stopped reaching out, but what that says about him. This is where uncertainty enters the equation, and uncertainty is a powerful motivator. In behavioral psychology, this is known as the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency for people to remember and fixate on unfinished tasks or unresolved situations more than completed ones. When communication stops abruptly, it creates an open loop in his mind, an unanswered question that demands resolution, and now the roles begin to reverse. You were once the predictable constant, the person who reached out, checked in, made plans. That consistency gave him a sense of security, perhaps even entitlement. But now you've introduced doubt. Whether he realizes it or not, he's now the one waiting. He's the one replaying past conversations, scanning for signs, trying to decode what your silence means. This is not about manipulation, it's about psychology. When you remove yourself from the equation, you force him to confront the reality of what your presence actually meant in his life. If he truly valued you, this is where that realization starts to surface. If he was indifferent, he may allow the silence to remain. And that in itself gives you your answer. But more often than not, even if he wasn't fully conscious of your importance before, the absence makes it clear. This is because human beings assign value based on perceived loss. It's not when something is present, but when it's missing that we fully comprehend its weight. Now, there's something critical to understand here. This reaction is not just about you, it's about him. When you stop reaching out, a man isn't just questioning your absence, he's questioning his own significance. Was he not interesting enough, not important enough? Why didn't you feel the need to check in, to chase, to seek his validation? This is a direct challenge to his ego, and the ego does not like to be challenged. The beauty of this entire process is that it reveals the truth. If a man values you, he will seek clarity. He will reach out, he will ask, he will attempt to reestablish connection. If he does not, he will let the silence linger. And that right there is your answer. There's an old saying, silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. When you stop texting and calling, you are not creating a void. You are making space for truth. If he cares, you will know. If he doesn't, you will be free. Either way, the result is clarity, and clarity is power. At first, he rationalizes it. He tells himself, you're busy, distracted, preoccupied with work, friends, or some fleeting obligation. But when the silence stretches longer than expected, something shifts. It's subtle at first, like a nagging thought in the back of his mind, but it grows. And as it does, he finds himself confronting a question he didn't expect. What if she's done with me? This is where the ego steps in, not just as a defense mechanism, but as a lens through which he interprets reality. See, a man's ego is built on a fragile but powerful foundation. The belief that he holds value in your world, that his presence means something, that he is wanted, needed, maybe even irreplaceable. Whether he was deeply invested or only mildly entertained, that belief existed, and now your silence is threatening it. Ego doesn't like to be questioned. It wants validation. It seeks reinforcement. And when it doesn't get it, it does what all egos do. It starts searching for an explanation that allows it to maintain control. He may assume you're playing games. He may tell himself you're testing him, trying to make him chase. These justifications give him a sense of power because they suggest that your silence is still about him, that you are still operating within his frame of influence. But the moment he starts to sense that maybe, just maybe, your silence isn't a strategy but a decision, the discomfort deepens. He starts to wonder if you've simply moved on, if you've detached, and that possibility stirs something most people avoid at all costs: real self-reflection. When a man is forced to confront the possibility that you are no longer invested, he's really confronting something much deeper. Was I ever enough? Did he bring enough value to the connection? Was he significant enough for you to stay engaged? This is where the lines between ego and emotion start to blur, and it's a critical moment because now he's not just questioning your actions, he's questioning his own worth. This is why some men react with anger when a woman pulls away. It's not always because they care deeply, it's because their ego has been bruised. Silence forces them to confront a reality they didn't anticipate, that their presence was not as essential as they believed, that they may not have been as special as they assumed, that you, the person they expected to always be there, have disrupted the narrative. But here's the most fascinating part. If there were real feelings involved, this ego check becomes a wake-up call. If he was taking you for granted, if he assumed you'd always be there, if he thought he had endless time to keep you in his orbit without truly valuing you, this is the moment he realizes his mistake. This realization can manifest in a few ways. If he has emotional maturity, he will acknowledge it. He will recognize where he fell short, where he failed to show up fully, He may even reach out, not out of desperation, but out of a genuine understanding that your presence in his life was not something to be passively received, but actively valued. But if he lacks that level of self-awareness, his reaction will be different. He may withdraw further, refusing to engage because it's easier to dismiss you than to confront his own shortcomings. Or he may lash out, trying to regain control by blaming you, accusing you of manipulation, or pretending he never cared to begin with. And this is where you get your answer. Because a man's response to your absence reveals more about his true character than anything he ever said in your presence. If he reaches out with clarity, with effort, with an intention to reconnect in a meaningful way, he has recognized your value. But if he remains in silence, if he lets the distance grow, if his only reaction is one of wounded pride rather than genuine reflection, then he has given you the most valuable gift possible, the truth. Because in the end, a man's reaction to losing you is the clearest indicator of what you meant to him. Not the words he spoke in comfort, not the promises he made when everything was easy, but his actions when faced with the possibility of your absence. This is the moment where his perception shifts, where his ego is forced to reconcile with reality. And the reality is this: if you were truly valuable to him, he will not let you fade into silence. If he does, then he was never meant to hold on to you in the first place. And that is something you should never grieve, because the loss was never yours. The moment you stop initiating contact, everything shifts. It may not be immediate, but the dynamic, the unspoken balance of power has now been altered. And this is something most people don't fully understand until they experience it. See, we tend to assume that relationships, whether romantic or platonic, operate on mutual consistency, that whoever has historically been the one to reach out, to check in, to make the plans will continue to do so. But the second that pattern is broken, the entire structure is forced to reconfigure itself. For a man who has been on the receiving end of your attention, this is an adjustment he never anticipated. Not because he consciously believed you'd always be there, but because the mind builds expectations around routine. It's human nature. We don't appreciate the presence of something as deeply as we feel its absence. And now, with your silence, that absence is felt. This is where something fascinating happens. The energy between you changes. You have removed yourself from the position of seeker. You are no longer offering validation, no longer feeding his ego, no longer sustaining the illusion that he holds the upper hand, simply because you were willing to be consistent. And the moment you stop reinforcing that belief, he has no choice but to reconsider where he stands. This is the turning point, because when you pull back, one of two things happens. Either he steps forward or he lets the space remain. And whichever choice he makes, it reveals everything you need to know. If he was complacent before, if he assumed you would always be there, this is the moment he feels that sense of security start to erode. And when security is threatened, people react. Some will attempt to regain their footing, reaching out to restore the balance. Others will withdraw, not necessarily because they don't care, but because they cannot handle the implications of what your silence represents. But here's the most important part. The power in this shift isn't about whether he comes back. It's about the fact that you no longer need him to. That is what changes everything, because up until this point, your role in his life was clear. You were the consistent one, the initiator, the provider of energy. But now, without your effort sustaining the connection, he is forced to make a decision, and decisions expose truth. If he values you, he will not let you fade into silence. He will step forward, not out of obligation, not out of insecurity, but because your absence has forced him to recognize your significance. But if he does nothing, if he allows the silence to stretch indefinitely, then that silence is your answer. It tells you exactly where you stood in his life, not through words, not through vague half-truths, but through the most honest language of all, action, or the lack of it. This is where many people struggle. They expect immediate validation, a sudden shift, an instant reaction, but human psychology doesn't always work on a predictable timeline. Some men react quickly, realizing the shift before it fully takes hold. Others take longer, needing time to process what it means to no longer have the comfort of your presence. But ultimately, the conclusion is the same. He will either show up or he won't. And the most powerful thing you can do in this situation is stay in your position. Do not fall into the trap of seeking reassurance, of breaking your own silence out of impatience or fear, because once you do, the balance reverts. You return to the role of pursuer, and the very dynamic you disrupted by pulling away, resets itself back to the way it was. This isn't about manipulation. It's about alignment. It's about recognizing that relationships should never be built on one person's effort alone. If the connection was genuine, if it held real value, then it will not dissolve simply because you stopped carrying the full weight of it. If it does, then what you were holding on to was never solid to begin with. And that is the core truth that many refuse to accept. When you stop chasing, you see who is truly willing to meet you where you stand. So let the shift happen. Let the silence do the work. Because in that silence, everything becomes clear. When the silence sets in, something deeper begins to happen. It's no longer just about who texts first, who reaches out, or who maintains control. It becomes an internal reckoning. At first, he may not even recognize it. The ego will try to shield him, convincing him that it doesn't matter, that he's unbothered, that this is just a passing phase. But as more time goes by, as he scrolls through old conversations or finds himself instinctively checking his phone, the realization creeps in something is missing. This is where emotion starts to override logic, because logically he may have told himself that you would always be there, that your presence was a given, that at any moment he could re-engage, pick up where things left off, and find you just as accessible as before. But now, for the first time, he has to face the fact that maybe, just maybe, he was wrong. And here's the truth about human nature. We don't truly feel the weight of something until it's gone. It's easy to take things for granted when they're freely given. But the second they're removed, the mind starts to reevaluate. We replay moments in our heads, searching for clues we missed. We question what we could have done differently. We wonder if we pushed too far, held back too much, or assumed too soon that what was offered would always remain. This is the moment of emotional awakening. If there was real connection, if there was genuine care, the absence you've created is no longer just an inconvenience, it becomes a source of regret. Regret is powerful because it forces a person to look inward. It strips away the illusions of control and forces a confrontation with one's own behavior. It's no longer about you reaching out, no longer about you showing up. It's about whether he made enough of an effort when he had the chance. And that's the question that will eat at him. Did he value you the way he should have? Did he show up fully, or did he only do the bare minimum? Did he take without giving, assuming you would always fill the gap? These are the questions questions that surface when a man realizes he may have lost something he wasn't ready to lose. But not every man responds the same way. Some will push these emotions down, too prideful or too fearful to acknowledge them. They will remain in silence, pretending indifference, convincing themselves that if they ignore it long enough, the feeling will pass. Others, however, will feel the weight of it and recognize that they have a choice to reach out and make things right, or to let their ego keep them stuck in the past. And this is where you get clarity. Not in words, not in theories, but in action. If he truly sees your value, if he realizes what he stands to lose, he will step forward. Not out of desperation, not as a reactionary impulse, but because the absence has made him aware of something he could not see before, that your presence was never guaranteed. If he does not, then you have your answer. Not everyone is capable of emotional depth. Not everyone is willing to confront their own shortcomings. Some would rather lose something valuable than admit they mishandled it. But that is not your burden to carry. What you must understand is this: your absence was never meant to punish him. It was meant to reveal the truth. And the truth is this: if he valued you, he will not let you slip away in silence. If he does, then he was never meant to hold on to you in the first place. And that is not a loss. That is a gift. When a man realizes that you're no longer chasing him, something profound happens. He is forced to confront a reality that he never fully considered. Up until now, he may have assumed, consciously or unconsciously, that your presence was a given, that no matter how much effort he put in or didn't put in, you would always be there as an option, as a constant, as someone who would eventually come back around. But now the silence lingers. The texts don't come. The calls don't happen. And the longer it lasts, the more undeniable it becomes. He is no longer in control of this dynamic. This isn't just a minor shift in behavior. This is a rupture in his understanding of the relationship. And as the weight of that realization sets in, a man will do one of two things. He will either step forward or fade away. For the men who step forward, the realization acts as a wake-up call. It forces them to recognize not only the value of your presence, but also the complacency in their own behavior. They see with clarity what they risk losing. And here's where an important distinction must be made. When a man reaches out after your silence, his motivation is everything. Is he reaching out because he misses you, or because he misses the validation you provided? Is he coming forward with intention, with accountability, with a genuine desire to reconnect? Or is this simply an ego check, a way for him to confirm that he still holds some level of influence over you? This is why patience is key, because many men, when faced with the discomfort of losing control, will reach out impulsively. Not because they're ready to invest in you, but because they can't tolerate the feeling of being ignored. They may send a casual text just to see if you respond. They may check in with something vague, "Hey, hope you're doing okay," to test the waters. But notice something important. They aren't actually making an effort to repair or rebuild anything. They just want to see if you're still there. And this is where many people fall into the trap. The moment he reaches out, they feel a sense of relief. He noticed, he cares, and they rush to re-engage, unknowingly resetting the dynamic back to the way it was before. But this is the moment you must hold your ground, because the goal was never just to get his attention. It was to see his true intentions. A man who truly realizes your worth will do more than just test the waters. He will step forward with clarity, with effort, with a willingness to have a real conversation. He will not just try to reclaim your attention, he will seek to understand what went wrong. He will ask himself, what did I do or fail to do that led to this? And when he reaches out, it will not be from a place of control, but from a place of awareness. But for the men who fade away, the outcome is just as revealing. Because when a man allows your silence to remain unchallenged, when he lets the distance grow without making an effort to bridge it, what he is really saying is, I was only here for as long as it was convenient. He is saying without words that he was only willing to maintain the connection so long as you were the one doing the work. And the moment you stopped, he was content to let it go. That truth may sting, but it is a necessary one. Because what you are left with after the dust settles is clarity. The man who steps up has proven his investment. The man who fades away has proven his indifference. Either way, you win. The real power in all of this was never about him. It was about you, about recognizing that your value does not come from how much effort you put into keeping someone engaged, but in how willing you are to walk away when that effort is not reciprocated. Because in the end, the right man will never need to be chased. At this point, the silence has done its work, the shift has been made, the space has been created, and the truth has revealed itself. But now comes the most important part. Not how he reacts, but how you respond to what has been uncovered. Because the real power was never in making him miss you. It was never about controlling his actions or predicting his next move. The real power was always in what this process forced you to realize about yourself. See, when you stop reaching out, when you stop giving freely to someone who never truly reciprocated, something profound happens. You begin to detach. The emotional hooks that once kept you invested start to loosen. The energy that you once poured into keeping the connection alive is redirected back to you. And that's where the real transformation begins. In the beginning, it's uncomfortable because when you've been conditioned to believe that effort equals value, that your worth is somehow tied to how much you give, stepping back feels unnatural. You might feel tempted to rationalize his absence, to make excuses for his lack of response, to tell yourself that if you just tried one more time, maybe things would be different. But that's just the old pattern trying to reassert itself. That's the part of you that still believes love is something you have to convince someone to return. But love, real love, has never worked that way. And deep down, you already know that. That's why this process, painful as it may be, is also liberating. Because by doing nothing, by simply holding your ground and refusing to chase, you have forced the situation to reveal what it was always going to reveal. If he cared, he would show it. If he didn't, he wouldn't. It really is that simple. The mistake most people make is thinking that silence is a tactic, some kind of strategy to provoke a reaction. But silence is not a game. It is a mirror. It reflects back the reality of the relationship with absolute clarity. It shows you whether the connection was built on mutual interest or on one-sided effort, whether he valued you for who you are or for what you provided, and most importantly, whether you were holding on to something that was never truly holding on to you. And once you see that truth, you cannot unsee it. There is no going back. Even if he reaches out, even if he suddenly realizes what he's lost, the version of you that once needed that validation no longer exists, because you are no longer operating from a place of lack. You are no longer looking to be chosen. You have chosen yourself. That's the power of letting go, not in a dramatic performative way, not as a test or a ploy, but in the quiet, resolute decision to stop chasing people who do not meet you where you stand, to stop over-explaining your worth, to stop settling for breadcrumbs when you deserve the whole meal. And when you reach this point, something incredible happens. You stop wondering if he will come back, and you start realizing that it doesn't even matter. Because the right man, the one who is truly meant for you, will never need to be jolted into awareness by your absence. He will recognize your value in your presence. So let the silence do its work, not for him, for you. Because in that space, you will find the clarity, the strength, and the undeniable truth that you were never the one who needed to prove anything.